Good morning. Welcome to the second event of the Programmes Dialogue in preparation of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, a partnership under, that will run under the New Horizon Europe program, and it is expected to be prepared during this year. The series of events on the Programmes Dialogue are dedicated to facilitate an exchange between existing ERA-NETs and joint programming initiatives, and together with national program owners and program managers, we want to learn from each other. We want to exchange the experiences that we have made during the last years in these initiatives, in order to use all these experiences and knowledge for the preparation of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership. To introduce you a little bit into this series and the purpose of it, I have a couple of slides prepared. So what we want is to learn about successful formats and tools that the ERA-NETs have been developing, good practices, successful activities, and effective approaches that have been developed. And we want to create, this platform of the dialogues as a mutual learning and capacity building process with an hopefully very open and interactive atmosphere of exchange. We have come from a process in spring and summer last year where we have brought together all the stakeholder groups under the set plan that have prepared a lot of content and scientific knowledge in order to develop the strategic research and innovation agenda, which has been put together by a very active group of national program managers and policy representatives from different countries. And the SRIA has been launched in November last year during a set plan conference side event in Berlin. So now this next step is the Programmes Dialogue, where we want to talk not so much about the scientific content and the things that need to be developed, but more about the programming formats, the structures, the elements, the experiences. The schedule has filled up since last time, so I think there are not so many slots left anymore, and we have a very interesting program that will run until mid-March every week in a sure-fix style. The modus will be that you will receive presentations, and after each block of presentations, we will have a question and answer section where you from the audience can interfere via the chat in YouTube. We will see your chat messages and we will be able to bring them into the event on the stage, and we can then react to this, and the speakers will answer to your questions. The Clean Energy Transition Partnership has been joined by a number of countries, as you can see here, and the group of countries is still growing. This will be a very powerful initiative, and you see here that a core team of very active experts from different countries, from funding agencies and ministries, is working on the development of this initiative. Today, we have as a guest the Joint Program Initiative JPI Urban Europe, and I'm very happy to introduce the speakers of today to you. That will be Johannes Bocksteffel from the Austrian Research and Promotion Agency, FFG, Christoph Gollner, also from the Austrian Research and Promotion Agency, my colleague Hans-Günther Schwarz from the Austrian Federal Ministry of Climate Action, and Susanne Meyer from the Austrian Institute of Technology. I also welcome my co-moderators, that is Gerdie Brembroek from the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, and hopefully, meanwhile connected, I'm not sure, Fredrik, here he is, Fredrik Lundström from the Swedish Energy Agency. In the background, we have support from an enthusiastic regie team that is Christian Spanik from Net Producers, who is the enabler of this new format that we are trying to develop also with this series. My colleague Arno Gattinger, who cannot be in the studio today but is watching the stream, and Nikolaus Reschen. Many of you know him as a very active supporter of our process from the Austrian Institute of Technology, which is now, and I'm very happy to announce that that Nikolaus has joined our team at the ministry now. So Nikolaus is now working at the Austrian Ministry of Climate Action together with me. And also Dirk Kuckertz, who is helping with the technical stuff in the studio together with Christian. That was it for the introduction. Only left to say for the audience out there and also for all the speakers, please be aware that this session is broadcasted on a YouTube channel, so it's public. And it also will be recorded and will remain on the channel so that people can watch it also later. So please be aware you are part of a live event. Whatever you say or write in the chat here will be public. That was it, I think, from my side. And with this, and having a quick look on my regie plan, I think we can start our first session. The first session will be dedicated to JPI Urban Europe as an initiative, and I welcome Hans-Günther Schwarz, who is the coordinator and initiative and initiator of this joint program initiative. He will bring us into what is a joint program initiative in, let's say, contrast to an ERANET, and we will learn a little bit of the whole initiative itself so that we better understand afterwards the different kinds of formats that have been developed here. So welcome, Hans-Günther. Very briefly to your background, you are very actively working on the European level. You are in the same department as me, working in the Austrian Ministry of Climate Action, but you're very active in the CETP-Plan steering group. Maybe you can also tell us very briefly about your intentions there. You are very actively bringing member states together there, also in a bureau. So the role of the member states in the CETP-Plan and your intentions there. A few words about this.
Thank you, Michael. So good morning, everyone. And I'm looking forward to starting this round of presentations on the Joint Programming Initiative Urban Europe. This is about transnational research and innovation funding. And for many countries, this has been an underestimated thing to do, because we've always thought, that the national market, when it comes to innovation and technologies, is probably what drives our success. And it's not true in the world of today. I think our home market now in Europe is Europe. Is the collaboration of the European countries. And this shows by through a new series of initiatives, very much like the Energy Systems Joint Programming Partnership or the Joint Programming Initiatives, where we have 10 of them actually in Europe now. And those joint programming initiatives go back to a decision of the European Council in 2008, where Europe decided, through the heads of states of Europe, through the political level, that the grand challenges of our time should be addressed by countries working together, and through this creating a larger critical mass for our research and innovation. So Urban Europe was created as one of those 10 initiatives out of the decision of the European Council in 2008. And the ambition that we have is to really support the transition of the urban spaces in Europe to a sustainable urban setting. And sustainability in the urban space is not an easy one, is not an easy thing, because we are facing actually a series of grand challenges which converge in the urban space. So still, we think that it's really worthwhile to develop a European research and innovation hub on urban matters. And we do this through joining our forces in research and innovation funding. And we've also decided to really do this by working very closely together with the problem or need owners. And these are the actors, in our case on the urban level, put money on the table, such as the city administrations, such as utilities, and such as investors in urban areas. Through our work in the last 10 years, we've been able to get 20 countries on board who are there as full members, supporting the management teams, which I'll present in a little while, and especially coming together in annual joint calls. So working together with those problem owners and need owners, and working together among the funders in the European countries, that's our key mission, which has led us very much like the joint programming partnership on clean energy transitions, moving on to the clean energy transition partnership. We as Urban Europe have now become the center of the development of the co-funded partnership on driving urban transitions, which we hope to submit under the new European Framework Program, Horizon Europe. If you look at this picture, this image, you see that the main features of what we do, and those features will be receiving a closer look by the subsequent presentations. So we have very strong governance that we built, and we find these governments to be very important. We have the joint calls, joint actions, joint projects that we create through through our activities. We have built a community which we find the centerpiece of our activities, communities of researchers, of cities across Europe. And we've worked in a very focused way on communication and the support of impact creation. And to do that, we've made sure that we have a governance structure which matches our ambition. So we have a governing board. And mind you, research and innovation funding network across Europe does not have a legal entity to support it. It's just the goodwill of the 20 participating countries. And I should say that again, it's the goodwill, it's the trust that we've built. So this is not something where we can rely on a political treaty or convention between the different governments. It's just our shared ambition that makes us work together. Having said that, we still came up with terms of reference on how we vote in the governing board, how we take decisions, and how we, for example, elect our chairs and vice chairs. We also have actually, and I'm saying this kind of at the side, we have sub-programs. So also initiated by the governing board, we have sub-programs, and one is very much along the lines of what Michael Hübner just said before. It's in the field of energy technology and energy politics. It's called the Positive Energy Districts Program, which I'm chairing. And it comes, this sub-program comes to show that the knowledge that we've built in the JPI Urban Europe is also something that we're sharing with European stakeholders, policy stakeholders, especially in the Strategic Energy Technology Plan, where I'm the Austrian delegate, and the SET plan decided a few years ago to really come up with implementation plans in the different energy technologies. And one was along the theme of smart cities or of energy and climate neutrality in cities. Now, we brought together the SET plan and the JPI in Europe in creating this sub-program, and it's one of the implementation working groups now, more or less in the SET plan. We do this, our joint calls and joint actions through funding research, obviously, and that brings into play our funding agencies. We have a funding agency working group, which is helping the governing board to implement the calls decided on the top level, and which also comes together in subgroups to spend the money. And when you spend money, then finally you need a legal agreement, and that's our call consortium agreements, which we establish for each call, and where we decide together how to spend the resources needed, how to also ensure the resources needed to administer a joint call. Of course, we have other support bodies as well, like a scientific advisory board. We have a strategic research and innovation agenda. And last but not least, we have a management board, which organizes our day-to-day operations. And the interesting thing is that this management board is composed of in-kind contributions, of secondments, of experts from different countries, where those different countries offer the resources through the work of those people. I think we have almost a dozen people working for us right now. I think that's it for the time being, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Hans-Günther. Very interesting first insight. So we understand now what JPI Urban Europe and your initiatives are about, what you are after, and very interesting the governance structure that you presented at the end. I think that's very specific already for such a, what you call the joint programming initiative, as you invented some elements that are dedicated to involve certain stakeholder groups, like in your case, the cities, which I think is an interesting element that is not maybe so common with other more technology-focused programs naturally. Bring in also my co-moderators, Gerdi and Frederick. Maybe you have already any questions or remarks to Hans-Günther's first part of the presentation. And at this point, I want also to underpin what Nicolas has written in the chat. Please, if you have questions of understanding, if you have remarks to make via the chat, feel free to do so.
Well, maybe I can make a remark. Interesting presentation, Hans-Günther. Thank you very much. I was interested to hear a bit more about the governance of that management board and how this relates to the organization of the calls. Is that also taken on by the management board, or are there separate organizations that take care of that?
The management board is there to ensure, and we'll hear some more about that in one of the next presentations. Okay. But the management board is here to ensure the midterm and long-term, actually, consistency of our work. So the management board brings together all the planning, like a call plan over several years, a thematic planning which uses the results of, for example, recent research that we've funded, or that's been funded on a national level even, to inform the creation of new call topics. However, the calls themselves are being done by the funding agencies working group, where we have those who do the hands-on funding work coming together as and you'll see later we have 43 or something funding agencies working together right now in on our platform, and those funding agencies then run the joint calls in whatever configuration is present for the joint call. For example, we might have 16 countries co-funding any specific joint call, and the funding agencies from those 16 countries, they create this call consortium. And I said earlier that there is a consortium agreement for them specifically that they work out, right? Of course, we have templates for that.
Yes, that sounds very interesting to elaborate on that. But thank you.
And I should say, yeah, please, Frederick.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for a good presentation. One thing I was going to ask you about is that you mentioned that really this is an alliance of trust. And I think we are many working in this field that knows that trust is really important. Yeah. So what, if I would ask you, what would be, if you would mention 2 key success factors to create trust in such a network? It's maybe not an easy question, but what do you think is the most important to create that trust?
It's a very easy question, because why? You know, to have trust, to build trust and to keep it. Trust is the most valuable asset that we have. Trust takes time to build and can easily be lost in a second. So that's what we have to keep in mind when looking at our network. It is a network. A network is flat. There's no hierarchy. There's no gravity, you know, which gets work flowing from one place to another. Work is always voluntary there. That's all. That also means that all the contributions, the in-kind work done in the management team, for example, or other in-kind contributions, like, you know, one country hosts the next meeting on their own costs, or one country pays for a study that we desperately need. Another country funds the work of one of the an expert in the management team, and so on. So that's the trust that we want to keep, which means we only take decisions in the governing board and in the funding agencies working group, which are in unison. So we don't, even while we have in the terms of reference, you know, rules which say if 2/3 of the members decide, then we never do this, because that would kind of break the trust. And I also have to say, of course, for anyone who listens, and you know, this is of course talking about, not about research itself. It's talking about a layer, a very high fly level, if you will. You know, that's where flight level. That's where we talk about the organization and the collaboration across borders on the policy level.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Hans Günther. I think that's the experience that we also have in our network, Frederick, when, of course, we have to give us strong rules in course of so in the case of this dispute, so that we have clear rules. But as Hans Günther said, I mean, we always avoid to have to come back to those strict rules and basically work in consensus. And the experience shows that for all the time being, we were able to solve everything in consensus. And I think that's also the case for your network, Hans Günther. And that's what you mean with building up the trust and working on the basis of trust, which is really very important. I think for this
and we'll hear about this in one of the next presentations, also when it comes to any potential distribution of Horizon Europe or Horizon 2020 co-funds, right? That's where you try to be fair to your partners, to not be the one who is responsible for kind of using the co-fund to opening up your own bottlenecks in funding, because you do this once or twice, but then your partners will say, hey, you know, aren't you able to do a proper budget planning? Why should we pay more or less for your deficits or your imbalance between the research community that is part of the proposals and your budget, which is too little, right? So here we go.
Cool. Frederick, Gerdi, any questions to the basic setup of the initiative, or should we jump into the next sessions?
I'm ready for the next session. I don't know if you have any more questions, Gerdi, but I'm sure there will be more to come later on.
Yes, I agree. Let's go to the next
Very
session.
Briefly, Hans Günther, maybe you can give us an outlook on the sessions that we can expect today. Are they somehow related to the elements of your governance structure somehow, or which aspects will you in your presentation
actually
highlight?
If you look at or Michael, if you click forward to the picture with the snake that I showed briefly,
the snake picture.
this is
yes.
This is more or less what we'll show you today. So the governance was the thing which I was talking about. We'll go into some more details in the next presentation, but mainly the next presentation will be about our calls and projects. And after that, we'll talk about other aspects of that. So like impact creations as such, to begin with, as I said, the joint calls, then like the program management works, and last but not least, colleague and I will just sum up with some recommendations that we think we should take out of today's workshop.
Thank you, Hans-Günther, for kicking this off. I think we will see you later on in the show today again. And now we switch over to our next session, which will be presented by Susanne Meyer from the Austrian Institute of Technology. And this session is dedicated to impact creation, joint actions beyond joint calls. What are you doing there, Susanne, and what are the goals that you want to achieve with these activities?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Susanne Meyer. I'm working for the AIT in Austrian Institute of Technology, but I'm delegated to the JPI Urban Europe Management Board. We heard about it already. And in this role, I want to share today the joint actions of the JPI Urban Europe that go beyond joint calls. We will listen to a dedicated session of the joint calls after this one, but we believed that talking about what we do apart from joint calls is very important. This is a kind of speciality of the JPI Urban Europe, because it follows a mission to stimulate urban transition by research and innovation. And we experienced very early that funding calls is not sufficient, but we need more joint actions. And I would also like to come back to the discussion before on trust, because I believe one of the critical elements to keep trust is to come into joint actions. So not only talk, but really come into joint actions. And I'm going to present today the joint actions all the countries are supporting in the JPI Urban Europe or participate to create impact based on the research and innovation results. This is the overview of joint action that go beyond joint calls to create impact. So, but I will only focus on a few of them, or in the red frame, to give you more information on. So the JPI Urban Europe has developed a strategic research and innovation agenda. In fact, it has already developed 2 agendas. Every 4 years, there is a new agenda, and this new agenda, of course, stimulates the joint calls, but it also stimulates the additional activities that go beyond joint calls. And one of the specialities of the JPI Urban Europe is to stimulate and also fund living labs, urban living labs as an experimental format that engages urban stakeholders. A second joint action that I will talk about is the Agora stakeholder platform of the JPI Urban Europe to engage stakeholders in a broader sense, and also to bring good practice out of the research box. The third one is the Urban Europe Research Alliance. This is a network of research organizations. And the last one is an activity on capacity building and replication. So I'm going to start saying something on the living labs. So JPI Urban Europe has started to fund living labs within the joint calls from the very beginning in 2010. So now it has funded 30 plus urban living labs across Europe, and this is very important for the JPI Urban Europe, that these living labs are experimental formats, that there are experimental formats in each and every country to also cover like the variety of urban challenges across Europe. And it is important, and now there are 73 European JPI Urban Europe projects that use this approach already. And very important is that we ask not only to test some technology in the labs, but actually engage stakeholders in urban stakeholders in the labs to experiment with them. It's not only technical experimentation, it's also experimentation on social innovation. Another format that the JPI Urban Europe is using to engage stakeholders is an Agora platform. We call it Agora platform. And the main aim of this platform is to create a place for urban administrations, business and societal actors to engage with researchers. So not only work with researchers, but try to bring the other actors together with researchers. What we use it for is to promote good practices from the projects to these urban administrations, businesses and social actors, but at the same time reflect and learn on the research needs from these actors, practitioners. How do we do it? We organize events of different sizes and formats, though there is not a platform where a fixed number of stakeholders is included, but it's a variable events with different people, different target groups, different topics. Agora events range, participation ranges also from 20 to 400, so it's always dedicated events for dedicated groups and dedicated topics. It's not an advisory body or something that is fixed, and we find it very useful to use this flexible form to work, with stakeholders. The third activity that the JPI Urban Europe is doing that goes beyond joint calls is to support the development of a so-called Urban Europe Research Alliance as a network of research performing organizations. So each and every country or national delegate in the JPI Urban Europe was invited to engage and mobilize its research performing organizations towards this research agenda. And for a time being, we have 58 research organizations from 20 countries that are engaged, and the network organizes scientific conferences, seminars, but also summer schools according to the topics of the strategic research and innovation agenda. But they are also allowed to participate in the joint calls. The challenge is sometimes to balance the interest of and activities of a research, of a network of research organization and a network of research funding organizations like the JPI Urban Europe. So this is, that sometimes, is a challenge. What we also discovered that if the RPOs that are active in this research alliance, they value this joint effort very much and provide 80% of the resources needed for the organization and coordination of such network on their own in-kind contribution. Last but not least, we have started a range of activities on capacity building and replication because we believe it's very important in order to actually stimulate urban transition. And we identified different levels where we want to build capacity and try to stimulate replication. So it's first of all, of course, on the level of cities where we want to promote replication, upscaling of good results. But it's not only the level of cities, it's also the level of national R&I programs, where we believe that mutual learning and cooperation of these programs is important. So if you look on the first bullet point, you see that we have organized a series of webinars where national programs introduced their own program, and so other programs and countries can learn how such mission-oriented programs also on national level could work and how they connect best can connect to the transnational JPI Urban Europe program. Secondly, we have set up a mobilization and replication group. This is a network of coordinators of national city networks, because we experience that working with one or the other city is important, but to bring things into a broader scale in all the countries is good to work with already existing national city networks and coordinate the coordinators of these networks, working with these coordinators that then can also translate and bring good practices in these national networks in the national languages. We also set up strategic dialogues with other policy and stakeholder initiatives on European and also national level, like mission innovation, Eurocities, and so on. We also run quite a lot of transnational policy consultations. For example, last year we have published a white paper on the definition of positive energy districts supported by all countries. So this was a dialogue between all the countries where we could find a joint understanding what is a positive energy district, and this is to lay the baseline for one of the core series. We also started to develop an inventory of, let's say, I call it mission results. So one of our missions is to work towards 100 positive energy districts in one of the sub-programs. So we started to develop an inventory of these paths to also see whether we reach our mission. What is under planning at the moment is a path, for example, an assessment scheme of positive energy districts and a replication scheme. So doing a lot of different activities under this angle. Yeah, I think this is the 4 activities I wanted to introduce in more detail, and I'm happy to receive your questions.
Thank you very much, Susanne. Also, thank you for being very much on the point with the timing. It runs, again, great today. That's very good. One interesting observation that I had was you were talking about this living labs that you have been funding. My question is, what are the experiences? How long does it take approximately that these living labs really become active? Because at the end you want to test something in the practice and so on, but they have to work on building on the trust with the stakeholders they want to involve, be it customers or citizens or whatever. That's something that I'm interested in. I would expect that it takes some years until they are really ready to to do something actively. So what's your experience there?
Is a good question, which also raised discussion in the JPI Urban Europe already. So I have said that there are several research projects that deal with urban living labs, and there are some research projects that actually build urban living labs, other projects that study urban living labs. We already have discussed that 3 years projects, and this is mainly the limits, like the maximum funding time for the project is sometimes too too little time actually to develop living labs. So some living labs should actually would need more time to develop. And I think there have been discussions already how this could be supported in the future, maybe as a sort of rather research infrastructure than project style. But then if you discuss it with 20 countries, then it takes time until new formats are developed.
Very interesting.
What we ask the Living Labs definitely is to develop a plan for sustainability and somehow embed it into the city administration in order to have a chance to continue it after the 3 years.
Yeah, very interesting. I think it's good that you started to fund them so early in the process. So you were talking about you started already, I think, nearly 10 years ago with that. So that's I think promising. One idea maybe that we should discuss, as we have developed in our network, the Joint Program Platform Smart Energy Systems, this validation network with living labs, where the idea is that new developers and projects could join already existing living labs that have already undergone this setup phase and maybe develops or test some of their developments at these existing labs. So maybe some of your labs would be interested to join this network. That could be something that we could discuss, as we also always are called to look for the interfaces between our initiatives. That could be maybe one. Fredrik and Gerdi, do you have any questions? And also keen to see what Nicolas will bring up from the chat.
Thank you, Michael. Maybe I can start off. I mean, one thing that I'm reflecting over listening to your presentation, but also by knowing your network, I think you've been very successful in mobilizing the user side, the problem owners or need owners, whatever you might call them. And you explained also a little bit in the mutual learning how you structure this. And I think sometimes for many of the other networks, I can feel we have a problem to get them to the table and to be in the lead of the discussions. Do you have some specific insights or key strategies from your point of view, why and how you manage to mobilize them to the dialogues? Is it because they are usually more involved in your projects, or how do you set it up?
I think one important or critical element is to also already engage them in development of the strategic research and innovation agenda to get their research needs on the table from the very beginning. And we invited them in this phase of the research development phase of the research agenda to contribute. And I think this is where they feel comfortable and they follow. A second element is, of course, to engage them into the projects. But this is a bit of a challenge, and we will hear about it in the next presentation, because not all funding agencies can actually fund city administrations. And for us, the city administrations are important players. What we see that many of them engage even without funding, but then, of course, sometimes their commitment is lower than if they would have had funding contracts. What we also see that this constant dialogue is important, so not inviting them once or twice, but inviting them more often to events, dedicated events where you give them a specific floor. They are also very happy if they can engage with other cities, so give them the opportunity to get to know other cities is important. What we have experienced. Yes, I think this is, and we have, of course, also an advisory board where cities are there. So these cities are, of course, very committed, but to engage more of them is difficult. And that is why we have started to work with the city network coordinators on a national level, because we also receive feedback that especially smaller cities and towns, they cannot come to European meetings on a regular basis, also because they have difficulties to get their travel funded and so on. So to experiment with other ways to engage them.
Thank you, Susanna. It was a very good reply. Yeah.
More questions, Frederick or Geri? I saw in the chat we have a more general question about the relation with other European initiatives. Maybe we should take that one also.
Yes, there is strategic relationships to other initiatives. So we work with bodies of the EU Urban Agenda, but also initiatives of the City Science Initiatives with Eurocities, as city networks like Eurocities or eClay. So they are important players also to mobilize their cities to the process of development of the research agenda, for example. So this is, yeah, I think there's regular exchange, and we also invite them to our events, but we also are becoming active in their activities and events to keep the relationships.
Covenant of Mayors is named here. Is used with them?
I think we are not, they're not one of the main networks of the JPI UE in Europe, the Covenant of Mayors, but I think they are second tier networks we are working with.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation, Susanne. I'm impressed by the number of networks and activities that you're running. I was wondering, can you say something about the priorities that you have there? Because you were talking about the Agora, the Living Labs, but also the Mobilization and Replication Group. Is there something you say, okay, this is really very important, or can you make some comments there?
I think many of the activities, but not all started at the same time. So JPI UE Europe exists already since 10 years. So we started with joint calls, and then we built up the other activities step by step. I think two things have been important. First of all is to be open to experiment also in such an initiative with new formats and see what new formats actually work. And if they don't work, then you leave it again. And the second thing, you need to have the resources to run additional activities. I think your question relates to priorities. I think all of them are important, and we try to run all of them, but we also started to set other initiatives, other joint actions, and if we see they don't run really, then we leave them again. So this is also, we establish a program monitoring system to also see whether the joint actions actually contribute to the aims or objectives of the program, and if you see they don't contribute, then we leave it again. So, and we have an annual program monitoring, and we then check also whether these joint actions run properly towards the objectives.
Thank you very much. We have to come to an end with this session, maybe very briefly, because I think that's an interesting question, and maybe you can follow up later on this, maybe also in the chat or in direct contact. But the question is here, are there some basic conditions to become a living lab in your initiative? Is there a very brief answer?
Yeah, very brief answer. We have a one-sider where we outline what's a living lab for us and what are the conditions that need to be fulfilled to become a living lab. And this can be
great.
shared.
So maybe you can supply us with this, and Nicolas will put that into the chat so that Beatrice was raising the question, can follow up with this. Thank you very much. So we are ready to go already for the next session, at least according to my time plan. Who is the next one to present? I have to go back to my, yeah, that's Johannes. Johannes, are you already ready to go. But you are right, we are ahead of the schedule. That's so unusual that I was not even recognizing this. But I think it was good to conclude on this session. And if there are more questions on it, I think we can take them later on if we keep going before the schedule. So I think Johannes is already there. Is that true?
Right, I'm here.
Great. So the next session is dedicated on joint calls, project monitoring, and distribution of EC co-fund. Johannes, you are working at the Austrian funding a research promotion fund, the FFG. So you are very much involved in doing the core work, like really doing the implementing the joint calls together with the other partners. So it's very exciting to have you here today as a presenter, and you can inform us and communicate firsthand experiences with the collaborative work that has to be done, and which comes on top of all the work that you have on a national level every day.
Right. So thanks a lot, Michael, for this introduction. So I'm working with this initiative now, I think, for nearly 8 years, so quite for a long time, since 2012. So since the second pilot call that we did, this was my starting point. And since then, the JPI Urban Europe has launched 9 other calls. Since the second pilot calls, we have 10 calls launched so far, and an 11th one will start quite soon. So presumably already next week or at the beginning of February. So I would like to give you now a little bit an overview of all our joint calls, but also what we have done with regard to project monitoring, and also what we have discussed about how can we distribute, of course, also the co-fund money that we get from the European Commission. So I think what's important to know, like Susanne has said before, of course, our joint calls are one core part, I would say, of our activity. But of course, it's not everything that we are doing, and we are doing a lot of other things as well. But to come to these joint calls, and I hope you can see now my second slide. As has been said before, we have launched so far 10 joint calls. 4 of those were within Aeronets, so we have combined both formats. We had self-funded calls only by the countries, but we had as well also calls funded together with the European Commission. If you look at our contracted budget, you see that perhaps in comparison to other networks, perhaps this might not be the really very big amount. So it was more than 90 million euros contracted since 2013. I think the reason here is that our projects perhaps sometimes are not that big as perhaps in other networks. We have talked about that. We have often an integration of cities, and what we see there also that I would say in comparison to, for example, projects with energy providers or other players in the energy sectors, this might be a little less. But nevertheless, in our projects, we had until last spring more or about 560 beneficiaries from 34 countries. So we always had also participants from other countries not directly involved in the JPI Urban Europe. So within the calls that we have, so the 7 calls that we had that we have launched until 2020, and only last year we had 2020 3 other calls running. So we had 84 projects until then, and since the end of last year, 27 projects added to that. So at the moment we have already more than 100 projects, but a lot of, so the last ones are still in the phase of where the contracts are set up. And when we had the peak, that was in 2019, that 300 active project partners worked in our projects. So to give you perhaps, sorry, a little bit better overview. What you can see here on the next slide is that our calls were of different size. So this does not show the budget, but it shows the participating agencies. So the number of funding agencies. So what you can see, we had a series of smaller calls at the beginning, the pilot calls. Then we had 3 calls within the framework of Aeronets. Then we had, again, and this is also, I think, a characteristic of this network here, we also try out some new things with a smaller amount of partners and also a smaller amount of agencies, like the call that we started in 2017, Making Cities Work, where the idea was also really to integrate cities directly in the work when we tried to draft the call text. So cities were involved directly really in the creation also of the call itself. This was the very first time we did this. Then there was an action done with China in 2018. And there was also a very big network started in 2016 within the framework of an Aeronet call with a global network, so with the Belmont Forum. Perhaps to go to the next slide again. So our calls combine very different types of research, and also the agencies that are engaged in this network are quite different. So also call themes range from strategic research to really innovation and implementation, but not always every agency can fund every type of research. So this is sometimes also a challenge for us to find the right combinations, and also to bring together partners who really can also are able to work together based on the regulations of their agencies. We talked already about our research and innovation agenda, the SRIA, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. So we try to base our call topics in this Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. And this means main topics are, for example, urban mobility, but also urban environment, participation, governance aspects, transition aspects, and of course also the pillar of the positive energy district that has been mentioned before. We have also said that the integration of communities is important, and we try to bring them in through meetings, through joint workshops, also beforehand, so that we are really also able to integrate them within projects. And a task that we are doing currently is we try to harmonize better our call procedures. So we are aiming at a kind of call handbook that we can also present to new agencies who are joining our initiative, so that it is clear also to them how our processes are running and what we are doing from the call text development to then the project monitoring and reporting later. Then perhaps what's important to know is also who are really our beneficiaries. And I think this reflects also a little bit who is engaged, for example, in the other activities, like, for example, in the Agora events. So you see that, of course, our main beneficiaries are still universities, but of course, we try to integrate the other sectors as well. So business, but also, for example, then, of course, also the city authorities and the municipalities, but also non-profit organizations or other governmental organizations. But nevertheless, more than 90% of the funding goes to universities and research organizations. And as I've said before, sometimes also the participations of municipalities and cities depend also if this is possible under the regulations of specific funding agencies. And sometimes this is also a little bit tricky. So on the next slide you see, and this is now related to our budgets, and what you can see here is also in the green line, also what is really the amount of shared budget that we had. So what we have found out is that not always really the budget that was pre-allocated could really be used then within the calls. And I think many of you know this problem mainly within the Aeronet calls, because sometimes within the Aeronets it's more complicated to fully use the budget that the different countries have foreseen. So we have found out that in the smaller calls, in these more experimental calls without European money, European Commission money included, it was easier because then sometimes also for the agencies it was easier, if needed, for example, to allocate more budget. But nevertheless, what we can see here is that within our three area nets that where the project selection was already some years ago, has happened some years ago, that at least we were able to allocate more budget than in the earlier area nets. So we tried also to find strategies how to optimize this, and I will show you this later as well. Sorry, and this brings me to this slide on the contribution or on the distribution of European Commission co-fund. So what you can see here is the amounts of the different countries of contracted project budget, and also the amount of the EC top-up that was used by the different countries. And you can see that there is a quite a big imbalance generally. So we saw that the biggest share of EC co-fund flew towards several countries, like mainly, for example, the Netherlands, UK, Germany, but also Belgium, Austria, Sweden, then with a lower amount. And then we saw that that we need also to set up additional measures also to ensure a fair distribution of the co-fund money. And for that reason, a working group has been established and a task force actually. And this task force tried to set up several rules, and a final report of this task force will be ready in spring 2021. So we found out that it is important within those co-funded actions that, of course, the funders should address a similar spectrum of funding recipients, so that this is, of course, one important point. Then if we have in the co-funds, we have always the two-stage procedures, so that we also make really use in a proactive way of these two-stage procedure, and that we try to get as many information as possible already in the first stage for the preparation of the second stage. And that can, for example, also mean that we, if it comes to countries that are underrepresented, that we try also in the second stage, that we try to set up principles in what way these can perhaps be integrated in a second stage to better use also the money of those countries. Then, of course, it should always be an adequate budget per call partner. So the budgets for the different agencies or ministries should, of course, be adequate to what is also expected for their country. And, of course, also per project, this should be always adjusted. I've talked already about the better representation, how this can be handled of other countries. We saw that oversubscription after the first stage should be limited to a maximum of 3. So it should be in not any case higher. Then a rule that we also introduced already several years ago, that we rank projects, and I think many arenas do that as well, that we rank projects always at integer values as the result of the expert evaluation, and that we don't use decimals for that, so that we have also a better possibility to really choose a little bit, at least in the lowest ranks here. And of course also that the EC co-fund and the national budgets should be connected in a certain way. And it brings me to the last slides already, and I think I'm quite late already in time. So what we also try to set up is our project monitoring. So we have created a so-called online project monitoring system as a central database for all running budgets, but also then for some, at the moment, not really integrated directly in the online system, but in separated files with call data. So data entry is done, of course, always by the coordinators of the calls, but also the funding agencies contribute a lot via the monitoring, for example, of the funding contracts. So one important part here is that we are monitoring the contracting procedures, Then we have a module dedicated to the progress of the projects themselves. So the project progress monitoring, and this is also the module where the projects directly can feed in, for example, their reports, but also can feed in also further data on their projects, on their partner structures, and so on. And we try to always be, of course, or we have to be, of course, GDPR compliant. So this system has already the GDPR was in the background when we created this, and it helped us a lot really to professionalize our data collection and our reporting. And that brings me already to my last slide here, because what we are planning in the future is we would like to integrate this data also on our program website, on the JPI Urban Europe website via a dashboard, so that we can more easily showcase our results, and that we communicate those, and that we can also more easily provide an overview of our main areas of activity, so that, for example, also stakeholders can see what can be expected from our running or also our finished projects. And by means of that, we would also like, of course, to create a more impact for the JPI Urban Europe. And in the future, this is planned and also as a single point of access for the users of our website of data that is at the moment quite disparately can be found only on the website. So thanks a lot. I think then my presentation is finished and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Hannes. Very good presentation. Thanks a lot. And I think there will be some questions, as each and every of the ERANET initiatives is basically working on and struggling with the same things.
Right.
And maybe also Frederick from our call management will have some specific questions to that.
Thanks. Yes, thanks, Johannes, for the presentation. I'm impressed by the work you're doing, and there's already a lot of things that you mentioned. You said you had a task force looking on how you distribute the co-fund, for instance. And these are the type of examples that I think are really interesting to learn about, because there are some things that I know some of us have thought about, how can we do it better? So here we directly have someone working with that. Maybe that's a very practical question, but so when you set up a task force like that, who is usually running that task force, and how do you motivate partners to participate?
Right. So I would say this is an advantage that we have in the JPI Urban Europe with our funding agencies working group. So also the funding agencies are playing quite an important role, as you have seen in the governance structure. And those issues are mainly coming from, of course, the funding agencies. So, for example, how this task force came up was that always in several ERANETs there have been a lot of discussions, and then the funding agencies agreed that it would be a good idea to set up a task force specifically dedicated on those questions. So normally it's done that way, that this is a discussion in one of our funding agencies working group meetings, and then several people say, okay, we are interested in this topic, and then we would be willing to participate in this task force, and that's the way we're doing that. So I would say that the funding agencies working group mainly gives us the opportunity to really quite easily react on such issues and to discuss such issues there.
Thank you very much.
I also have a question. Yes. You were talking about the various calls, and it struck me that it might be that there will be different funding programs in the various member countries that would be suitable to take part in a call on urban mobility and a call on urban energy systems.
Right.
How do you organize this?
Yeah, generally I can only say this makes it sometimes really quite complex also. So sometimes we have also from several countries, and of course other ERANETs have that as well, and other initiatives, but sometimes we have also different funding organizations from different countries. And I think this is a crucial point that you are pointing at. So actually, it's then often not perhaps always the same agency, and we are also really trying to reach different actors also, and that also results sometimes in what has been mentioned earlier already. That so we see also that the network within the projects, it's not perhaps that stable as in other initiatives within the projects, because it means that always project groups come together on a specific topic. And if we have, of course, so many different topics within our JPI Urban Europe, then there's also a bigger differentiation in the project groups than that we have seen. So. Generally, I think this is really a challenge for us, and it's also a challenge in the governance of the whole JPI, because also, for example, in the European Commission, we have not only a dedicated really DG there, but we are dealing with several DGs, and I would say that also based on some of our initiatives, we tried to find also a structure where we can more easily also cooperate, for example, with the European Commission, wherein a kind of intergroup has been set up to bring together these urban topics that are a little bit spread around through the different DGs. And I think the same is on the national level. So I think also on the national level, it's always important that we bring together the different groups and we bring together the different actors. And for example, if I think only of Austria, for example, in our ministry, also the funding department for mobility or for energy is different. So we also need really to try to bring together those groups, and of course that's the same in several other countries. So it's complex for sure.
At that point, maybe Nicholas, do we have any questions from the chat at the moment? Here we have one. Why was not specified a fixed percentage of the EU co-fund based on national funding? What is the specific reason for that?
Right. So always there was, we had also debt. So this was also, of course, a measure that we have taken, like several, I guess, or many other airlines have done. So of course we had quite an amount fixed somewhere, mostly in our consortium agreements. But then in practice, it's what we see, so that it's sometimes really difficult to find the right amount, and we ended up then with a solution that we found it better to give a range, so that we say, okay, this is a minimum that we are aiming at, but and perhaps also a maximum, and to work with this range. So because this makes it easier then to come really then to a distribution of the EC topic that makes sense for this specific call. And I think also the question that came earlier, I think this is relevant here as well, because what we also see that also sometimes we have so many different topics, and also really actors in the countries might differ from topic to topic. So it might be that a country is very strong, for example, in the field of energy, but it has not so many, perhaps, really, for example, researchers in other fields. So this might also play a role. And we have always also to think about that. How can we really align also our audience or target audience in the different countries with the specific themes and the specific topics also of our calls. So this is a challenge as well, I would say. I hope this answered this question.
Another question from my side, if I may. This monitoring appliance or app that you've developed, is this something that is building on Austrian systems that you already have, or is specific
No.
for this collaboration?
Right. So we have. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, what I also wanted to ask is this something that you've funded jointly, or how did this go?
So actually we funded this jointly via one of our ARNets. So it was actually part of our very first ARNet already, but it took, I have to say, it really took quite a long time to really implement it. So actually really of several years, but it's in place since for more than a year. And we saw that it makes really our life easier, but it was really developed from scratch for these kind of joint actions. And it means we are using, I think this is, I didn't talk so much about that, but we are using different systems for the submission. So we are not using, for example, a dedicated tool of a subcontractor, but we are using tools that are also used on national level. It was quite often the Austrian submission system, but also we used one French system and are now starting with the Romanian system. And then after the calls have ended and we have selected the projects, we import these data and we try to align them, of course, in a certain way. And then we import them to the new monitoring tool, which is run by a subcontractor, actually. And it is fast actually via different ARNet actions. So this is the way how we did that.
Thanks.
Can I elaborate on that? I think that's a very interesting thing that you have tried different submission systems. Maybe that's common in some other ARNets too, but can you, first I'd ask, are there some key learnings you think you've done from that? When moving from one, is it a lot of effort to do that? And then what is usually, what happens when you change to another submission system, or is it easy to transfer it?
So I think what you have really to have in mind is that it is always a little bit a change for our applicants. So I think that is a crucial thing, that of course the system has its own characteristics, and it's really important also to be quite clear towards the applicants. What are the changes? How does it work? And of course, it's in our case, as we are always using actually national systems, but national systems that are a little bit adjusted, of course, for the needs of these transnational programs. Of course, always these national systems have their own characteristics. And what we have learned is that, of course, you need a good support for them for the applicants, and so I think it's really crucial that that you have a team for the call secretariat also that is always really assisting the applicants with this, but of course the different systems have always their advantages, sometimes also a little bit disadvantages. And what we have also learned, that it is always aligned also a little bit with, of course, the targets of the specific agency. So if it's an agency that is more oriented towards really research actors, then it will look different than the one from a more applied agency, I would say. But it worked nevertheless. I have to say, generally it worked, and we are doing this. Actually, we are doing this in a kind of an contribution, either in kind within the self-finance goals, or then of course with the co-fund money that is used for the reimbursement of the agency that is running the submission system.
Just a short follow-up on that. So looking 5 years into the future, we're moving into partnerships, and we will hopefully keep collaborate on this. Do you think we will still use different national systems, or do you think we will eventually move over to something that is one single system? And is that even possible? And is it something that we want to have?
So I think this is a discussion that is now ongoing within the new partnership. So this is something that is, of course, discussed. So the plan is also, I think, one important, decision that has been made already is that because we had in the different calls, we had very different secretariats, and we would try to improve this a little bit, because then and to have a little bit more continuity in this. And the idea is to have a core group of agencies that is really co-working on this secretariat task. But what is not decided at the moment, if, for example, also an outsourced system shall be used in the future, and if this is an option for us, or if we will decide for one of the systems that we have already used, and then, of course, also that this specific agency will be reimbursed then by the means of future partnership. So this is an ongoing decision, I have to say, and not finalized one.
Thank you very much for this very interesting round. we are still a little bit ahead of the schedule, but I think my feeling is that we have concluded on this topic, or are there any urgent things that you still want to discuss? Because otherwise we could reserve the remaining time a little bit for the end, where we have scheduled the last session very tightly, so I think we can still use it. So we move over to the next session. Nicolas, something from the chat? Actually not, right? So let's do it. Let's go for the next session. This is a session called or titled Mission-Oriented Program Management. And I think that's very interesting to talk about, as more and more on the European level, also on national programs, we are moving into mission-oriented programs or calls, at least partly, as we see, okay, we have come a long way in the development of different technologies and solutions, but more and more we are after this real system solutions or impactful innovation in a broad sense. So more and more we become focused on what do we want to achieve at the end. That's what we call a mission-oriented approach, and I'm very happy to welcome Christoph Gollner, also working at the Austrian Promotion Research Promotion Fund, FFG. And Christoph, you're gonna tell us more about how can we do mission-oriented programming.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Christoph Gollner, working for JPI Urban Europe at the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, and I am actually program manager of the sub-program on positive energy districts. And naturally, I want to highlight the importance and significance of having a program management for achieving the missions. I am sharing my screen. I hope you can see it.
Okay, Christoph, sorry, you asked me to give you time information because you can't see us while your presentation. So I tell you 5 minutes before off that you have 5 minutes left, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This brings together a lot of points that have been already mentioned before by Susanne or Hans-Günther and Johannes. But it kind of summarizes the key tasks of the program management that are important, that we perceive as important for achieving the missions of the JPI Urban Europe program. And that is, first of all, content management in general, a mission-oriented generation of topics, key fields of actions, and priorities for call agendas and additional activities through consultation, through various formats of involving stakeholders. Susanne has mentioned some of them. Another one is portfolio management, by generating feedback loops of project results into the strategic development and the call agenda, and thus ensuring a thorough management of the JPI Urban Europe portfolio. An important part of the program management is the policy coordination. I will come back to that in a second. Of course, communication and dissemination create an impact beyond the specific calls, fostering the exchange between JPI Urban Europe's projects and the respective partners, widening participation, engaging widening countries into the programs and having them having a real broad participation in the programs on a European level, another important part of the program management. But also beyond Europe, the international cooperation, I will also come back to that later, and the program monitoring that has been mentioned before already. Regarding the policy coordination, one of the key issues, one of the key tasks here is to organize and well prepare meetings of national delegates in in the JPI Urban Europe program, or in the program on positive energy districts, usually twice a year, in summer and autumn, including program progress reports, decision-making material, and delivering summary conclusions of these meetings, organizing webinars and task forces on dedicated topics. That has also already been mentioned before, e.g. the task force on the co-fund distribution, task force on national recovery programs in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, how to integrate those into the programs. And we're organizing a series of webinar series with different stakeholder groups and different participants. Of course, coordination with neighboring initiatives is an important task of the program management. That is, of course, other SETPlan initiatives. The PET program is the SETPlan Action 3.2, and there are neighboring initiatives like Michael's. And in the future, of course, the coordination between the partnerships, Driving Urban Transition Partnership, Clean Energy Transition Partnerships, and other partnerships, but also Mission Innovation, Urban Agenda, City Networks, etc. So this coordination is a key task of the program management, and of course, the coordination with the European Commission. Regarding the communication and dissemination, there is a support for project outreach. We organize project meetings, also across calls, project videos, project interviews, blogs, etc., etc. You name it, and we constantly try to develop that in order to be up to date in the formats. Organizing events for knowledge sharing and relationship building. Urban Lunchtop is a very specific format, very open talks between researchers and practitioners to dedicated topics. If you go to the website of JPI Urban Europe, you will find the upcoming Urban Lunch Talks. And usually they are very inspiring discussions between practice and research. JPI Urban Europe has a policy conference in Brussels, or in days like this, online every 1.5 years, bringing together the key ambitions and key achievements of the JPI Urban Europe programs. Creating impact stories is another task, bringing together a project catalog for each call and synthesis reports for each call is another part of contributing to a proper and impactful communication and dissemination of the activities of Urban Europe. Sorry. Widening participation has been important since the beginning of Urban Europe. 8 of 20 participating countries of JPI Urban Europe belong to the group of widening countries. The challenge here is not only to engage them, but to bring them into leading roles. And we constantly work on that because we believe that it is important to have really a broad engagement on a European level. 7 missions up to date have been organized to visit widening countries, and the widening participation is really important in all joint actions of the JPI Urban Europe, the development of the strategic research and innovation agenda, joint calls, stakeholder events, UERA participation, etc. Regarding international cooperation, that has also been mentioned. There have been joint calls with China and the Belmont Forum. There is a call together with Mission Innovation in the planning at the moment, and we do have strategic cooperations with other countries. So the aim is also to really spread the activities of JPI Urban Europe on a global level and support the discussion on a global level on the urban issues. Program monitoring has been mentioned before. JPI Urban Europe aims to implement its objectives outlined in the SRIA, in the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, but also contributes to higher level policy goals like the Urban Agenda or sustainable development goals. The monitoring helps strategic steering of the program and a higher visibility of the progress, of course, and the monitoring and self-evaluation concept includes, of course, a series of indicators. We developed an implementation plan for monitoring, and there is an annual real-time program monitoring with learning sessions. Of course, a constant development of tools to improve the monitoring processes, to provide good processes in place for the upcoming Driving Urban Transitions Partnership monitoring, and monitoring only started in 2016. Just to show you the structure of the program monitoring, there is monitoring on different levels, on the program level, on the specific call level, and on the project level. So this is a very intense task also of the program management. And then coming back to who we actually are and how this is organized, the management board of JPI Urban Europe, there are secondments by JPI Urban Europe members, experts that are part of the JPI Urban Europe management board, like myself. The annual contributions are both from the European Commission and more importantly, the in-kind contributions have a worth of roughly 800,000 euros annually. So we do believe that this is important to really achieve the missions, to bring forward the development of the programs, to develop the topics in exchange with the expert and with the different stakeholder groups, and the program management is able to fulfill, or hopefully fulfill, these tasks and contribute to a successful implementation of the program. And with that, I would like to thank you and looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
So you're perfect in time. I give back to Michael.
Great, thank you, Christoph. That was interesting and also a quite broad block of topics. So I'm keen to see what the questions will be. I had one remark that I already started to think about when Susanne was presenting about the capacity building. That is one aspect that in our community, Frederick is always again and again, and I'm very thankful for this, bringing this up. That is, how can we with our initiatives support our own partners? Because dedicated to our job profile, we are of course always after supporting projects, supporting the stakeholders, the stakeholder community, and so on and so on. But how can we with our initiatives also create support for our own work at home in our own agencies? How can we support our national work? And I had several elements that I recognized. So Susanne was telling about support for national programs and national policies. So that also showed that you are looking after how can everyone really benefit from being part of this network and of this collaboration. And you now also were talking about this policy coordination aspects that you're supporting. So I think that's very interesting because, I mean, each and every one of us, or put it the other way around, very often we have the picture, okay, this transnational collaboration comes on top of everything that we already have to do nationally, and it's somehow always seen as an additional effort. But on the other hand side, if it starts really to pay back in that sense that we can use some of the elements and the learnings and things that we promote there and we develop there for our national work, and it really starts to be fertilizing each other's, I think then it becomes really exciting, and then it becomes successful and efficient.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think this is basically a key issue, and we're trying to really do. I'm working in Vienna and in Austria, and we really try to bring together regarding the PET program, the program on positive energy districts, to really bring together the activities we are doing in the transnational program with the activities on the national Austrian level, and we all, as far as we can, also support similar processes in other member countries to really bring together the national and transnational levels, which is tricky, and you need dedicated persons to do that, and you really work on that. But I think, as you mentioned, as you said, it is fruitful and also effective and efficient to really align these activities.
Further, you want to add something to this, as we have discussed it many times?
Yeah, no, I mean,
I think it's really a key point. How can we create value for our partners, right?
Yeah, no, I think you present great examples on a work on that. I mean, I think all of us trying to do that, we are struggling, as you were mentioning also, Michael, that it's sometimes the international work, you might almost have to feel that you're doing it on your spare time besides fulfilling the national duties. And I think all of us, I mean, as we are creating a joint international network with activities, but also with tools, and I'm sure this will be easier now with the digital world that is evolving, we should be able to get more payback. But yeah, I don't think I have an additional question, but I'm closely monitoring what you're doing, and I'm really interested to learn more about it. And I hope we can continue this dialogue and also practice it more together, how we can improve that so that it's more natural for national funding agencies to engage, not as an obligation, but as something they really need to be relevant.
Eddie, some observations from your side also on these aspects of how can we create most of a value for our partners. You reported last times in the presentation of the ACT AeroNet, and that I kept in mind that you have team meetings with all the participants and all the funding agencies. What was it? Once a month or even more frequently. I found that very impressive because it means really a lot of engagement and commitment of time from people, and I found it really impressive that this is so. It shows also that people see a real value in it. Did you have these kind of discussions in the networks that you're involved? So in ACT or Geothermica, how the AeroNets themselves can maximize the value for us as the funding partners in it also?
Yes, I think this is an obvious question that everybody has, and yes, we are meeting very frequently in our AirNet Act every 2 weeks with the management team. This well, it focuses on the issues at hand, of course, but it also keeps us very well informed and engaged in the process. If you're asking about how do you justify the amount of time you're putting into these efforts, I think that one of the most important things is in ACT is to see that we have great projects going on and that we see that these projects deliver value for all of us. And I think that in this network, it's broader, obviously, with more additional work other than calls going on, but still the cross-fertilization that you have between the various countries and networks is absolutely the same. And I also recognize that you put a lot of effort into monitoring the benefits that this is bringing and what the results of the projects are and spreading the word. Do you agree, Christoph?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, see, the sun is coming in here. Yes, that's one of the key aims with the monitoring, to really see to really be able to kind of see the impact and assess the impact of the activities we are doing. And I agree that a very constant communication between the partners, between the different members countries, is an important issue to keep them engaged, to provide that interface between the national levels and the transnational levels, and this is an intense work and needs dedicated time. Which brings me again to it is important to set up a structure like a management board, like a program management, to be able to fulfill these tasks. Otherwise, things can diffuse easily in a way.
Mm-hmm. I was interested also to hear a bit more about you. You have a management board and you had a governing board as well. So what's the interaction there? We haven't heard so much about the governing board of your activity, I think.
Well, the governing board consists usually of the national delegates of the member countries. They make the decisions. They give the task of the management board, the program management, is to report to the governing board on the content development on the development of the program, which is approved or not by the governing board, and the governing board in turn approves the next steps, the further steps to move on with the program. So it's a kind of ping pong. It's the operational work is mostly done in the program management, and so to say offers that to the governing board, and the governing board is very much also there to kind of ensure that the management activities are on track for achieving the missions that have been set. Mm-hmm. So there is as I said, there are these meetings twice a year, but of course also in between there are several meetings to ensure that constant communication between the governing board, the decision-making level, and the operational level.
We have some questions also in the chat. We can go on, but maybe in between we could take also something from the chat. Thank you, Nicholas, for bringing this up. How is it possible to involve widening countries? Is there a set of conditions to be met by the country to consider? Interesting aspect. That was one of the aspects that I was also interested in seeing this, that you are working with countries from outside Europe.
I mean, basically, it's a it's a joint commitment to specific tasks. Of course, some structures have to be aligned, but in the end, widening is very much it's a goal in itself, I would say, to really broaden the base regarding achieving a certain mission. In that case, urban issues, and to promote the exchange between the countries. So maybe Hans-Günther or Susanne can refer to that more specifically. I would say it's really like having that international cooperation, that widening is really important for bringing Europe and the European activities and on the table, position Europe as a global player, but also integrate on the European level to really bring different structures in different research communities, etc., on the European level together. So I cannot precisely answer on specific preconditions, but
also inspiring aspects that Hans-Günther mentioned in the chat. I think Nicolas brought that on the screen for a second, so maybe you can bring it back, Nicolas. But it seems that, of course, I mean, one of the important aspects is to bring them also in a leading and really participative role. I mean, that's also what we see within our initiative when we have now the first countries from outside Europe participating in the calls. That if they join late in the process, it's of course more difficult, and to really bring them in a proactive position. As we are moving towards our final round, we have Hans-Günther back in the studio, and maybe Hans-Günther, you want to say a word on this. Hans-Günther, can you hear us? Maybe he needs just more time to prepare for the final round. Are there more questions from my co-moderators on the actual session before we go into?
I think we'll say it in the next chapter, so no problem.
That's great. Thanks, Hans-Günther. So you're back again.
Did you hear it?
Yes, we hear it.
Yeah, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Seems that the back channel is not working with you, Hans-Günther. Maybe we can solve that in the background while we are preparing for the next session. Coming back to my co-moderators, do we have any additional things we want to discuss with Christoph?
Maybe I have one, again, maybe it's not an easy question, it might be answered shortly. I mean, all of us have now been, we've been having to work very differently due to the pandemic. And some things gets more difficult and maybe some things get easier. Do you have any, what's your experience? What has it become in general much more difficult, or have some things become easy because you are more digital in everything? Or do you have, some thoughts to share on what the pandemic has maybe given as an insight?
Well, the good news is that it doesn't significantly interrupt, like in other jobs, and we're kind of privileged here. It doesn't significantly interrupt the whole program activities. It is possible that we work and work on our program and on our missions. Some things are easier. Yes, it's easier to organize even quite short-term meetings with the digital opportunities. We developed quite some tools for interactive involvement, for really having workshop-like settings. But on the other hand, you cannot underestimate the importance of personal coming together, and I think for a lot of participants in our members in our programs, it is quite hard not to have that specific settings to really meet the people, discuss even at a cup of tea or coffee. I think we must not underestimate that. But in general, I think it is possible for us to go on to do our work and thankfully be able to do that.
Thank you very much.
Gary, some additional things from your side at the moment here. And Nicholas, do we have some more questions on this session in the chat, or should we move into our final round?
What maybe a question that I have is, you are with this joint programming initiative, you're working to become the partnership of driving urban transitions. Do you take the organization that you're having into that driving urban transitions, or are there changes that you envisage?
No dramatic. Basically, we're kind of using the existing structures to move that into the Driving Urban Transition Partnership, maybe with some additional aspects and learnings from experiences. But basically, we're transferring the structure. I was told to be short. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So very good. Thank you very much for this session. Thank you for the presentation, Christoph, and thank you for the questions.
Thank you.
We are now, as always, we used up all the time we had saved at the beginning, and all of a sudden we are again under time pressure for the last session. So let's jump into this. The presenters have prepared